The November wind howled through Cedar Falls like a wounded animal, rattling the shutters of the small church where Clara Whitmore knelt, her hands raw from scrubbing the wooden floors. The lye soap stung her cracked skin, but she welcomed the pain. It kept her mind from wandering to places better left unvisited. "Mrs. Whitmore," a gruff voice called from the doorway. Sheriff McKenna stood there, his weathered face grave beneath his wide-brimmed hat. "Pastor wants to see you. Says it's urgent." Clara rose slowly, her black widow's dress rustling against the floor. 2 years had passed since James died, but the townspeople still expected her to wear mourning clothes. She dried her hands on her apron and followed the sheriff to the pastor's study. Pastor Brennan sat behind his desk, his thin fingers steepled. Beside him stood Dr. Harrison, the town's remaining physician, looking uncomfortable. "Clara," the pastor began, "we have a delicate situation. Silas Hart has been wounded, badly. He's holed up at the old trading post and refuses to come to town for treatment." Clara knew the name. Everyone in Cedar Falls knew of Silas Hart, the tracker who'd lived among the Apache, who could follow a ghost through a sandstorm, the man who'd been betrayed by his own unit and left for dead 5 winters ago. He was more legend than man now. A cautionary tale mothers told their children about the dangers of straying too far from civilization. "What has this to do with me?" Clara asked, though she suspected the answer. "Doctor," Harrison cleared his throat, "I cannot leave town. Mrs. Morrison is due any day, and the Hendricks boy still has fever. You're the only one with medical training who could go. It's unseemly." Clara said quietly, "A widow, alone with such a man." "Which is why we're asking, not ordering," Pastor Brennan said. "But Christian charity demands we try. The man will die without care." Clara looked out the window at the gray sky threatening snow. "How far is the trading post?" 2 days' ride through rough country. Sheriff McKenna said, "Jake Morrison will take you in his wagon. He's heading that direction with supplies anyway. But he won't stay. Can't spare him that long." She thought of the empty room she'd returned to each night, the whispers that followed her through town, the way even the other widows kept their distance. Here was purpose, even if temporary. "I'll go," she said. The men exchanged glances of relief mixed with concern. "Doctor," Harrison handed her his medical bag. "Everything you'll need is here. The wound's infected. From what we hear, gunshot, maybe knife. The trapper who brought word wasn't clear." Clara took the bag, its leather handle worn smooth by her late husband's hands. James would have gone without hesitation. Perhaps that was why she agreed, to honor his memory, or to punish herself for surviving when he hadn't. The next morning dawned cold and bright. Jake Morrison's wagon waited outside the church, loaded with flour sacks and ammunition. Jake himself sat hunched on the driver's bench, a rifle across his knees. He was a taciturn man who'd lost his own wife to childbirth 3 summers past. "You sure about this, Mrs. Whitmore?" he asked as she climbed aboard. "As sure as anyone can be." She settled her small traveling bag beside the medical supplies and pulled her wool cloak tighter. They left Cedar Falls as the sun crept over the eastern hills, painting the desert landscape in shades of rust and gold. The wagon wheels creaked a steady rhythm as they followed the old trading route north, toward the mountains where Silas Hart waited, dying or too stubborn to die. She didn't know which. The first day passed in relative quiet. Jake wasn't one for conversation, and Clara was grateful. She watched the landscape change from scrub brush to juniper, then to tall pines as they climbed into the foothills. By evening, they made camp near a small spring. Jake built a fire while Clara prepared a simple meal of beans and hardtack. "You knew Hart before?" Clara asked as they ate. Jake spat into the fire. "Knew of him. Scouted for the cavalry back in '78 during the Apache troubles. Good tracker. Maybe the best. But something went wrong out there." He paused, choosing his words. "They say his unit was ambushed by gun runners. When the dust settled, Hart was the only one missing. Found him 3 days later. Half dead, crawling back to camp. But he survived. If you call it that, man hasn't been right since Lives alone, trades furs when he needs supplies. Indians trust him more than whites do now. Jake fixed her with a hard stare. You be careful, ma'am. Wounded animals are dangerous, and Hart's been wounded a long time. They reached the trading post late the next afternoon. It sat in a small valley, backed against a sheer cliff face, a strategic position that spoke of frontier paranoia. The building itself was solid log construction, with narrow windows and a heavy door. Smoke rose from the chimney, the only sign of life. Jake stopped the wagon 50 yards out. "Hello, the house," he called. "Got the nurse from Cedar Falls." For a long moment, nothing. Then the door cracked open. A rifle barrel emerged first, followed by a face Clara could barely make out in the shadows. "Leave her and go!" The voice was hoarse, edged with pain. "Now see here, Hart," Jake began. "I said go." The rifle shifted slightly. "She can walk from there." Jake looked at Clara, clearly torn. She placed a hand on his arm. "It's all right. Help me with my bags." He did so reluctantly, setting her traveling bag and the medical supplies on the ground. "I'll be back in 4 days," he said quietly. "If you're not waiting by the road, I'm coming in after you." Clara nodded. She waited until his wagon disappeared around the bend before picking up her bags and walking toward the trading post. The rifle barrel tracked her progress but didn't waver. As she approached the door, it swung wider. The man holding the rifle was tall but hunched with pain, his face hidden by unkempt dark hair and a week's growth of beard. His shirt was stained with blood, old and new. "You shouldn't have come," Silas Hart said. "Yet, here I am." Clara kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Are you going to let me in? Or shall we conduct the examination in the doorway?" Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes, gray as winter storm clouds. He stepped back, lowering the rifle slightly but not setting it aside. The interior of the trading post was surprisingly neat. Furs hung from the rafters, and shelves lined the walls, stocked with supplies. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, and a narrow bed sat in the corner. The smell hit her immediately. Infection, blood, and the sharp scent of whiskey used for more than drinking. Silas moved to a chair by the fire, each step careful and measured. He sat heavily, the rifle still in reach. Now that she could see him clearly, Clara understood why the town spoke of him in whispers. Scars marked his visible skin, some old and white, others pink and recent. His eyes held a wariness she'd seen in wild animals, constantly assessing threat and escape. "Well," he said, "you came to doctor me. Get on with it." Clara set down her bags and removed her cloak. "I'll need you to remove your shirt." He hesitated, then set the rifle aside and began unbuttoning with stiff fingers. When he struggled, Clara stepped forward to help. He flinched but didn't pull away. The shirt fell away to reveal a body that told stories of violence, beyond the scars. A fresh wound festered on his left side, a deep gash, possibly from a knife, angry red and seeping. But it was the sheer number of old injuries that made her breath catch. How was this man still alive? When did this happen? She opened the medical bag, forcing professional detachment. 5 days back, maybe 6. And you've been treating it with whiskey and hope? Seemed as good as anything else. Clara bit back her response. She'd seen pride kill more men than bullets out here. "This will hurt," she warned, preparing carbolic solution. "Can't hurt worse than getting it." She worked in silence, cleaning the wound while Silas sat rigid, his jaw clenched but making no sound. The infection was bad, but not beyond help. As she worked, her fingers inevitably traced over old scars, each one a chapter in whatever brutal story had led him here. "You're not what I expected," he said suddenly. "What did you expect?" "Someone older, softer, the kind of Christian woman who'd pray over me while I died. Sorry to disappoint. I'm fresh out of prayers." She began preparing a poultice. "This needs to be changed twice daily. I assume you have clean water. Spring behind the cliff stays fresh year-round." As she bound the wound, her hands steady despite their proximity, she became aware of him watching her, not with the leering interest she'd grown accustomed to from men in town, but with genuine curiosity. "You're the doctor's widow," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. They say he was a good man." "He was." Silas studied her face. "Then why do you look like you're the one who died?" The question cut deeper than any blade. Clara finished tying the bandage and stepped back. "Rest now. I'll prepare something for you to eat." She busied herself at the small stove, aware of his gaze following her movements. Outside, snow began to fall, soft flakes that would soon become a storm. She was trapped here now, for better or worse, with a man who saw too much and a past she couldn't outrun. As night settled over the valley, Clara allowed herself one moment of truth. She'd come here not out of Christian charity, but because healing others was the only way she knew to avoid examining her own wounds. And perhaps that made her and Silas Hart more alike than either of them cared to admit. The first 3 days passed in a tense rhythm of necessary interaction. Silas would sit stone still while Clara tended his wound, his gray eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the cabin walls. He answered her medical questions in monosyllables and disappeared each dawn, returning only when the sun dipped behind the mountains. Clara learned to work around his absence. She organized the medical supplies, cleaned what little needed cleaning, and prepared simple meals that he ate in silence. At night, she slept on a makeshift pallet near the fire while he took the bed, the only concession to propriety he seemed willing to make. On the 4th morning, she woke to find fresh tracks in the snow circling the cabin. They weren't human. Wolf, perhaps, or cougar. When Silas returned that evening, she mentioned them. "Notice those, did you?" He set his rifle by the door, snow dusting his dark hair. "They've been coming around since the storm started, curious about you. Should I be concerned?" "No, they know better than to come too close." He paused at the water basin, washing his hands. "You see things others miss? That's unusual. My husband taught me to be observant, said it could save lives." "Smart man." Silas moved to his chair by the fire. "How did he die?" Clara's hand stilled on the pot she was stirring. No one in Cedar Falls asked anymore. They all knew the story. "Typhoid. There was an outbreak at the army fort. He went to help, and caught it himself." "Yes." She resumed stirring, perhaps more vigorously than necessary. "He was always putting others first. It was both his best quality and—" She couldn't finish. "And what killed him?" Silas said quietly. "I understand." That night, Silas's fever spiked. Clara woke to the sound of him muttering, twisting in sweat-soaked sheets. She lit a lantern and approached cautiously, even delirious. This was a dangerous man. His eyes were closed, but his lips moved constantly. "No, Jonah, get down! I said get down!" His voice cracked. "Nina, run! Run!" Clara fetched cool water and clean cloths. She needed to bring the fever down, which meant removing his sweat-soaked shirt. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked the buttons. Even in the lamplight, the scars on his torso were shocking, a map of violence written in flesh. As she bathed his burning skin with cool water, Silas caught her wrist. His eyes opened, glassy with fever. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't leave me out there. You're safe," Clara said softly. "You're in your cabin. The war is over. Never over." His grip tightened. "They're still screaming." She didn't pull away, letting him hold her wrist while she continued working with her free hand. Gradually, his breathing steadied, though he kept muttering names. Jonah, Nina, Samuel. By dawn, the fever had broken. Silas woke to find Clara asleep in the chair beside his bed, her hand still holding the damp cloth. He studied her face in the morning light, the purple shadows under her eyes, the lines of worry that seemed too deep for someone her age. When she stirred, he closed his eyes, feigning sleep. "I know you're awake," she said quietly. Your breathing changed. He opened his eyes to find her watching him with those unsettling green eyes. "You stayed up all night. The fever was bad. You were delirious. What did I say?" Clara hesitated. "Names? Jonah and Nina." Something shuddered in his expression. He sat up slowly, pulling the blanket higher. I need to check my trap lines. You need to rest. That fever... The fever's broken. He swung his legs out of bed, then paused. Thank you for staying. After he left, Clara found herself studying the cabin more carefully. There were few personal items, but what she found was telling. A Bible, untouched by the look of it. A stack of letters tied with string, hidden behind the flower bin. A small silver locket wrapped in oilcloth. She shouldn't look, knew it was wrong, but something compelled her. The letters were from a woman named Nina, a sister. From the tone, they spoke of missing him, of hoping he'd come home, of their brother Jonah's death in some unspecified incident. The last letter was dated 3 years ago. When Silas returned that evening, Clara had dinner waiting. He ate slowly, watching her across the table. You're different today, he said finally. Am I? You look at me like you know something. Clara set down her fork. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have... You read the letters. It wasn't a question. I figured you might... Curious nature and all. It was wrong of me. Maybe. He pushed his plate away. But now you know why I live out here. Can't face what I left behind. Your sister loves you. She wants you to come home. My sister wants her brother back. That man died the day Jonah did. His voice was flat, emotionless. I got him killed, led him and 5 others straight into an ambush because I trusted the wrong person. He was 19. Clara reached across the table, stopping just short of touching his hand. The war killed him, not you. Wasn't war. Was after, during the settlement troubles. I was supposed to know better. Read the signs. Instead, I got cocky. He stood abruptly. I'll sleep outside tonight. The fever's passed. You need proper rest. In this cold? Absolutely not. I've slept in worse. Silas. She rarely used his given name. It stopped him at the door. We've both lost people. It doesn't mean we have to lose ourselves. He turned back, his expression unreadable. Doesn't it? Look at you, wearing widow's weeds like armor, hiding in that church, scrubbing floors till your hands bleed. We're both ghosts. Clara, only difference is I'm honest about it. The words stung because they were true. After he left, Clara sat by the fire, staring into the flames. Outside, snow continued to fall, sealing them in this strange sanctuary where pretense seemed pointless. Near midnight, the door opened. Silas entered, covered in snow, carrying an armload of wood. Storm's getting worse, he said, not meeting her eyes. Be foolish to freeze for the sake of propriety. He rebuilt the fire while Clara pretended to sleep. She heard him settle into his chair, heard the soft sound of pages turning. Curious. She peered through her lashes to see him reading one of Nina's letters by firelight, his scarred fingers tracing the words. I know you're awake, he said without looking up. How do you always know? Spent 10 years learning to read the smallest signs. Saved my life more than once. He folded the letter carefully. Nina writes every month, even though I never answer, stubborn as our mother was. Why don't you write back? What would I say? That I'm sorry. That I wake up every night hearing Jonah scream. That I became something worse than what killed him. He stared into the fire. Some things can't be fixed with words. Clara rose and moved to sit across from him, pulling a blanket around her shoulders. Tell me about him. Jonah. Silas was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, he was smart, wanted to be a teacher, but the war came and he enlisted. Survived Antietam and Cold Harbor just to die in some nameless canyon because his brother trusted a lying son of a bitch who sold us out for gold. And Nina, married now, has 2 boys. Husband's a good man, runs a store in Missouri. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. She sends drawings the boys make, horses mostly. They've never met me, but she tells them about Uncle Silas. You could visit. No. The word was final. That life, that man, he's gone. Better they imagine some heroic uncle than know the truth. They sat in companionable silence, the fire crackling between them. "Finally," Clara asked, "why did you really let me stay? You could have sent me away that first day." Silas considered the question. "Maybe because you looked at my scars without pity. Most people see them and see a victim or a monster. You just saw wounds that needed tending." He met her eyes. "Or maybe I was just tired of being alone." The honesty in his voice made something shift between them. Clara felt the careful walls she'd built begin to crack, here in this snowbound cabin, with nowhere to hide. The truth seemed like the only currency that mattered. "I dream about him," she said suddenly. "My husband. He's always asking why I didn't make him stay home that day, why I let him go to the fort." Her voice broke. "I was relieved when he left. We'd been arguing about children. He wanted them. I was scared. I thought we'd have time to work it out when he got back. Clara, I'm not the good widow everyone thinks I am. I'm selfish and angry and so tired of pretending otherwise." Silas leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You're human. That's not a sin, despite what your pastor might say." She laughed bitterly. "Everything feels like a sin these days. Then maybe it's time to stop living by other people's rules." Their eyes met across the fire, and Clara felt something dangerous spark between them. Not desire, not yet, but recognition. Two damaged souls seeing themselves reflected in another's pain. Outside, the storm raged on, sealing them in together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new walls to navigate. But tonight, in the firelight and honesty, they were simply two people learning what it meant to be seen. The morning after their late-night confessions, Clara woke to find Silas cleaning a rifle at the table. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside crystalline and blindingly white. She watched him work, noting how his hands moved with practiced efficiency despite their scars. "I want to learn," she said. He looked up, eyebrow raised. "Learn what?" "To shoot, properly." She sat up, pushing her loose hair back. "If I'm going to live out here, even temporarily, I should know how to defend myself." Something flickered in his eyes. Approval, perhaps. "Get dressed. We'll start after breakfast." They made their way to a small canyon sheltered from the wind. Silas had set up targets, old cans and pieces of wood, at varying distances. He handed her a smaller rifle, a Winchester carbine. "This was Nina's," he said quietly. "She left it when she got married, said I might need it someday." Clara took the weapon carefully, feeling its weight. "She sounds like a smart woman." Smarter than her brothers, that's certain. He moved behind her, adjusting her stance. Feet shoulder-width apart, that's it. His hands guided her arms into position, and Clara was acutely aware of his presence, the warmth of him in the cold air, the steadiness of his breathing. When he spoke, his voice was close to her ear. "The key is to squeeze, not pull, like you're pressing a flower between your fingers." She fired. The shot went wide, sending up a puff of snow well beyond the target. "Again," Silas said simply. "This time, breathe out as you squeeze." They spent the morning like that, Silas patiently correcting her form, Clara gradually finding her rhythm. By noon, she was hitting the closer targets consistently. When she finally knocked down a can at 30 yards, she let out a whoop of triumph that echoed off the canyon walls. "I did it!" She turned to face him, eyes bright with accomplishment. Silas was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since she'd arrived. It transformed his face, revealing the man he might have been before tragedy carved its marks on him. "You're a natural," he said. "Good eye, steady hands. Good teacher," she countered. They stood there, grinning at each other like children, until the moment stretched too long and awareness crept in. Clara lowered the rifle, suddenly self-conscious. "We should head back," Silas said, but he didn't move. "Yes," she agreed, not moving either. A raven called overhead, breaking the spell. They gathered the targets and walked back in comfortable silence, the snow crunching under their boots. That afternoon, while Silas checked his trap lines, Clara found herself humming as she prepared dinner. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt not happy exactly, but alive, present. The simple act of learning something new, of succeeding at it, had awakened something she'd thought dead. When Silas returned, he brought 2 rabbits for dinner and news. Saw Jake Morrison's tracks on the main road. He'll be here tomorrow for you. The words landed like cold water. Clara's hand stilled on the pot. Oh, yes, of course. Your 4 days are up. Town will be expecting you back. They will. She forced herself to continue stirring. Though I doubt I'll be much welcomed. A widow spending 4 nights alone with a man. There will be talk. There's always talk. He skinned the rabbits with efficient strokes. Question is whether you care. Did she? Clara considered it as they prepared dinner together, moving around each other with the ease of long practice rather than mere days. In Cedar Falls, she'd cared desperately about reputation, about fitting the role of proper widow. But here, in this simple cabin where survival mattered more than society's rules, those concerns seemed as distant as the stars. After dinner, Silas pulled out a worn deck of cards. Do you play? Poker. My father would roll in his grave. Good thing he's not here then. He taught her 5-card draw, amused by her competitive streak. They played for dried beans, Clara catching on quickly to the art of bluffing, when she won her first hand with a pair of 3s in sheer bravado. Silas laughed, a real laugh that seemed to surprise him as much as her. You're dangerous, he said, shuffling the cards. Remind me never to play you for real stakes. Afraid I'd clean you out? Without question, his eyes met hers across the table. You've got a poker face that'd fool the devil himself. Years of practice, she said lightly, but they both heard the truth underneath. Later, as the fire burned low, Clara found herself reluctant to retreat to her pallet. Silas seemed equally unwilling to end the evening. Tell me about Alaska, she said. You mentioned once you'd been there. Spent a winter in Sitka, right after... He paused, then continued. After everything went bad, thought maybe I could lose myself in all that snow and silence. Did it work? For a while. But turns out you pack your ghosts with you wherever you go. He stretched his long legs toward the fire. Beautiful country, though. Mountains that touched the sky. Glaciers blue as summer dawn. And the silence. Never heard anything like it. Sounds lonely. It was. But sometimes lonely is what you need. He glanced at her. What about you? Ever think about leaving Cedar Falls? Every day. The admission surprised her. But where would I go? What would I do? At least there I have work, a place to stay. That's not living. That's just existing. And what you do here is different? He considered that. Maybe not, but at least I chose it. They lapsed into silence. But it wasn't uncomfortable. Clara realized with a start that she couldn't remember the last time she'd spent an evening just being with someone, not performing grief or piety or any of the other roles expected of her. I should go to bed, she said finally, though she made no move to rise. Probably should. Neither moved. The fire crackled, sending shadows dancing across Silas's scarred features. He looked younger in the soft light, more vulnerable. Clara wondered what he saw when he looked at her. Clara, he said suddenly. Tomorrow, when Jake comes. Yes? He seemed to struggle with words. You don't have to go, if you don't want to. Her heart stuttered. Silas, I know it's not proper. I know what people would say, but... He ran a hand through his dark hair. These past days, having you here, it's been like breathing again after holding my breath for years. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I can't. You know I can't. The scandal... Would it be worse than what you're going back to? Scrubbing floors and dodging whispers? Dying by inches in that church? That's my life. My penance. For what? For surviving? For being human? He leaned forward intently. James is dead. Clara, you're not... That's not a sin. It's just truth. The tears came then, hot and sudden. You don't understand. I wished him dead sometimes. When he'd come home excited about another couple's baby, when he'd talk about names for our children, I'd wish he'd just stop. And then he did. Silas moved around the table, kneeling beside her chair. He didn't touch her, just stayed there, solid and present. That's not how fever works. And you know it. Your wishes didn't kill him any more than my trust killed Jonah. Bad things happen. People die. Doesn't mean the living have to die with them. Clara looked down at him through her tears. Is that what we're doing? Dying? We were. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a tear from her cheek. Maybe we don't have to anymore. The touch was gentle, barely there, but it sent lightning through her. She caught his hand, holding it against her face. His skin was rough with calluses and scars, but warm, alive. This is madness, she whispered. Probably. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Been a long time since I did anything that wasn't. She leaned down. Or he rose up, later. She could never remember who moved first. Their lips met softly, tentatively, like travelers greeting in a foreign land. Clara tasted salt from her tears and something wild, like pine and winter wind. When they parted, both were breathing unsteadily. Silas pulled back, his gray eyes dark with something Clara didn't want to name. I should, she began. Yes. He stood, stepped away. Good night, Clara. She fled to her pallet, pulling blankets over her head like a child hiding from thunder. But she couldn't hide from the truth that pulsed through her. She wanted to stay. Not for charity or duty or even companionship, but for the dangerous possibility of being fully alive again. Tomorrow Jake would come. Tomorrow she would have to choose between the slow death of respectability and the uncertain life Silas offered. But tonight, with the taste of him still on her lips and her heart racing like a wild thing, she already knew what her choice would be. The hard part would be finding the courage to make it. The sound of approaching horses woke Clara before dawn. She lay still, listening to the steady hoofbeats drawing closer through the snow. Not Jake's wagon, these were riders, moving with purpose. Silas was already up, rifle in hand, peering through the narrow window. His body was tense, coiled like a spring. Stay down, he said quietly. Behind the bed. Clara slipped from her pallet, her heart hammering. Who is it? Trouble. 3 men dismounted outside. Clara recognized the voice that called out. Brock Garrett, who ran guns and whiskey through the territory, avoiding both army patrols and reservation boundaries. Hart, know you're in there. Just want to talk. Nothing to talk about. Garrett. Silas hadn't moved from the window. You're on my land. Funny thing about land, changes hands real easy out here. Garrett's laugh was ugly. Heard you had company. That pretty widow from Cedar Falls must get lonely, just the 2 of you. Clara saw Silas's jaw clench. State your business and go. Simple enough. You cost me good men 3 years back, playing hero for the army. Figure you owe me. I don't owe you anything except a bullet if you don't move on. Now. No need for hostility. See, I got a proposition. You know these mountains better than anyone. Guide us through the back passes to the reservation. No questions asked, and we'll call it even. No. Might want to reconsider. Be a shame if something happened to your lady friend. Accidents happen all the time out here. The threat hung in the cold air. Clara saw Silas shift slightly, calculating angles and odds. You've got 10 seconds to get off my land, he said, voice deadly calm. This isn't over. Hart, you got something to lose now. Makes a man vulnerable. The riders left, but their presence lingered like smoke. Silas remained at the window long after the hoofbeats faded. Who were those men? Clara asked, though she suspected she knew. The reason Jonah's dead. His voice was flat. Garrett was the one who sold us out, set up the ambush. I thought the army had dealt with him, but cockroaches always survive. Will they come back? Yes. He finally turned from the window. You can't stay now. When Jake comes, I heard the threat. He'll use me against you whether I'm here or in Cedar Falls. It's different if you're here. Here, I can protect you. There, he shook his head. Get dressed. We need to move. They spent the morning transforming the cabin into a fortress. Silas showed Clara where he kept extra ammunition, taught her the locations of hidden sight lines, explained which windows provided the best coverage. She helped him reinforce the door and check the stability of the shutters. "You're expecting a siege," she said. "I'm expecting Garrett to do what he does best, attack when he thinks I'm weak." Silas loaded extra rifles, placing them strategically around the cabin. "He's wrong about my being vulnerable, though having something to protect doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous." Jake Morrison's wagon appeared at midday, lumbering through the snow. Clara watched from the window as he pulled up, looking nervous. "That's close enough. Jake!" Silas called out. Jake's face was pale. They came to town. Silas, Garrett, and his men asked questions about Mrs. Whitmore. "Pastor sent me to fetch her back quick. And if she doesn't want to go?" Jake shifted uncomfortably. "That's not really an option. Town council says she comes back or she's not welcome back at all, and they'll send the sheriff next time." Clara felt the ultimatum like a physical blow. Choose now, the safety of convention or the danger of freedom. She looked at Silas, who stood rigid by the door. "It's your choice," he said quietly. "I won't make it for you." She walked outside. Approaching Jake's wagon, the older man looked relieved. "Thank the Lord. Get your things. Mrs. Whitmore. We can make town by nightfall." "Jake," Clara said clearly. "Tell Pastor Brennan I appreciate his concern. Tell him I'll be staying here to continue Mr. Hart's treatment." Jake's mouth fell open. "Ma'am, you can't. The scandal will be significant, I'm sure." She kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. "My personal effects are at the boarding house. Perhaps you could have them sent. Mrs. Whitmore, please reconsider. Your reputation is my concern, not yours." She softened her tone. "I know you mean well. Jake." "But I'm where I need to be." Jake looked between her and Silas, who had emerged from the cabin. "This is madness. That man's got enemies. Garrett won't let this go." "Then we'll face that when it comes," Clara said. Jake shook his head. "God help you both. You'll need it." He turned his wagon around, muttering prayers or curses. Clara couldn't tell which. As the wagon disappeared, Clara felt the full weight of her choice. No going back now. She'd cast her lot with a scarred tracker against the world's expectations. Silas touched her shoulder. "You sure?" She turned to face him. "No, but I'm tired of being sure. Sure is safe, and safe is just another word for dead." That night, the temperature plummeted. They brought in extra wood, checked the shutters again, and settled by the fire. The atmosphere was charged, partly from the danger lurking outside, partly from the decision that hung between them. "Tell me about your husband," Silas said suddenly. "Not how he died, how he lived." Clara was surprised by the question. James was earnest. Everything he did completely. When he decided to become a doctor, he studied until his eyes crossed. When he courted me, he brought flowers every day for a month. You loved him. I did. The way you love at 20. Desperately. Without question. She stared into the fire. "But I'm not 20 anymore. And that kind of love, it asks you to be someone you're not. Sometimes." "What did it ask you to be?" "Perfect. The perfect wife. The perfect mother-to-be. The perfect support for his calling." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out I wasn't perfect at any of it." Silas moved closer on the bench they shared. "Maybe perfect is overrated." James didn't think so. "James is dead." His voice was gentle but firm. "You're not betraying him by living, Clara, by wanting things, by being imperfect and real and here." She turned to look at him. In the firelight, his scars were just shadows, and she could see the man underneath, strong, damaged, but unbroken. "Is that what we're doing?" she asked. "Living?" "Trying to." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "For the first time in 3 years, I'm trying to—" The touch sparked that same electricity as before. Clara leaned into it, her breath catching as his fingers traced down her jaw. "Silas, tell me to stop," he said roughly. "If this isn't what you want, tell me now." Instead, she kissed him. Not tentatively this time, but with all the hunger she'd buried under widow's weeds and propriety. He responded instantly, pulling her against him, his hands tangling in her hair. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Clara felt wild, reckless, alive in every nerve. "Inside," Silas said, his voice strained. He stood, pulling her up with him. "Not here, not with Garrett possibly watching." They stumbled into the cabin, hands reaching for each other in the dim light. Silas kicked the door shut, threw the bolt, then pressed Clara against it, kissing her like a drowning man seeking air. Her hands found the buttons of his shirt, working them free. She needed to touch him, to feel life pulsing under her fingers. He groaned against her mouth as her palms spread across his scarred chest. "Clara, wait!" He caught her hands. "You need to know. I'm not an easy man. I have nightmares. I disappear into the mountains for days. I don't know how to be with someone anymore." "I don't need easy," she said fiercely. "I need real. I need this." He studied her face in the lamplight, then lifted her hands to his lips, kissing each palm. "You brave, impossible woman." They moved to his bed by unspoken agreement. Clara's hands trembled as she unpinned her hair, letting it fall around her shoulders. Silas watched with dark eyes, his own hands working at his belt. "You're sure?" he asked one more time. "I'm sure I don't want to die without having lived," she said. "I'm sure that tomorrow isn't guaranteed. I'm sure that you make me feel like myself for the first time since—" Her voice broke. "Please, just please." He came to her then, gentle despite his rough exterior. They undressed each other slowly, mapping scars and stories with careful fingers. When they came together, it was with a desperate tenderness, two souls recognizing their matching wounds and choosing connection over isolation. Outside, snow began to fall again, muffling the world in white silence. But inside the cabin, warmth bloomed between two people who'd forgotten they could feel anything at all. In each gasped breath and whispered name, in the press of skin and tangle of limbs, Clara and Silas found something they'd thought lost forever: the simple, fierce joy of being alive. Dawn light filtered through the frost-covered windows, painting silver patterns across the bed. Clara woke slowly, aware of unaccustomed warmth along her back. Silas, solid and real, one arm draped protectively across her waist. For a moment, she let herself simply exist in this newfound peace. "I know you're awake," he murmured against her hair. "How do you always know?" "Your breathing changes, gets lighter, like a bird about to take flight." His arm tightened slightly. "Don't fly away just yet." She turned in his embrace, studying his face in the pale light. Sleep had softened his harsh features, making him look younger despite the scars. James and I, we never spent a whole night. He always went back to his own room after his loss." Silas traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Though I can't say I made a habit of it either. Haven't shared a bed all night since—" He stopped, shadows crossing his face. Since before Jonah died? There was a woman in Tucson, Maria. Thought we might have something, but after the ambush," he shrugged. "Couldn't stand to have anyone close. Felt like I'd poisoned them somehow." Clara pressed her palm to his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath the scars. "You're not poison, Silas." "No. Look what happened yesterday. Garrett knows about you now. I've put you in danger just by wanting you here. I put myself in danger by choosing to stay." She met his eyes firmly. "Don't take that choice away from me by making it about protecting me. I'm not some delicate flower that needs sheltering." A smile tugged at his mouth. "No, you're not. You're more like a wildfire, beautiful and dangerous and impossible to control." "Is that a complaint?" "Never." He kissed her softly. "Just an observation from a man who's spent his life reading signs." They rose reluctantly. the spell of the night giving way to day's necessities. Clara dressed while Silas stoked the fire, both moving with new awareness of each other. When their eyes met across the room, heat flashed between them, but underneath was something deeper, a recognition, a claiming. "I need to check the perimeter," Silas said, buckling on his gun belt. "Stay inside. Keep the rifle handy. How long will you be gone?" "An hour, maybe 2. Need to see if Garrett left any surprises." He paused at the door. "Clara, if something happens—" "Nothing will happen." She moved to him, straightening his collar with steady hands. "You'll be careful, and you'll come back, and we'll face whatever comes next together." He caught her hands, holding them against his chest. Together. I'd forgotten what that word meant. After he left, Clara busied herself with domestic tasks, tidying the already neat cabin, preparing breakfast, checking their medical supplies. But her mind kept circling back to Garrett's threat. She'd seen men like him in the frontier towns, men who took what they wanted and justified it with might. They didn't forget slights or forgive debts. She was banking the fire when she heard it. Footsteps on the porch, too heavy to be Silas. Her hand found the rifle as the door handle turned. "Mrs. Whitmore?" a familiar voice called. "It's Dr. Harrison, from Cedar Falls." Clara lowered the rifle but didn't set it aside. "Dr. Harrison, what are you doing here? May I come in? It's rather cold." She unbolted the door cautiously. The doctor stood there, looking older than she remembered, his medical bag in hand. "How did you—" "Jake Morrison was worried, said you'd chosen to stay with Hart. The pastor sent me to assess the situation." His eyes took in her loosened hair, her man's shirt tucked into her skirt, Silas's shirt. She realized with a flush. "I see the situation is as they feared," he said quietly. "What you see is none of Cedar Falls' business." Clara stepped back, allowing him entry but keeping the rifle visible. "I'm a grown woman making my own choices. Your choices affect others. Clara, the church has been good to you, provided work and shelter when you had nothing. This is how you repay that kindness. By finding happiness, by choosing life over slow death." Her voice rose. "Yes, doctor, this is exactly how I repay it." He set down his bag with a sigh. "I'm not here to judge you, my dear. Well, not primarily. I'm here because Garrett came to town after leaving here. He was agitated, made threats. Sheriff McKenna thought you should know. We know about Garrett. Do you know he's gathering men, offering good money for guns willing to ride against Hart?" Dr. Harrison's face was grave. "This isn't just about you anymore. Clara, you're the excuse Garrett needed to move against a man he's hated for years." Before Clara could respond, the door burst open. Silas filled the doorframe, rifle aimed at the doctor's chest. "Easy," Clara said quickly. "It's Dr. Harrison from town. He came to warn us about Garrett." Silas lowered the rifle slowly, but his expression remained hard. "Doctor, bit far from your sickbed rounds. Mr. Hart." Harrison nodded stiffly. "I see you've recovered from your wound. Mrs. Whitmore's nursing, no doubt." "No doubt." Silas moved into the room, positioning himself slightly between Clara and the doctor. "Say what you came to say." Harrison relayed his warning about Garrett gathering men. Silas listened without expression, but Clara saw his knuckles whiten on the rifle stock. "How many men?" Silas asked when the doctor finished. 6, maybe 7. He's promising good money and whatever they can loot from here." "When?" "Soon. Maybe tonight. Maybe tomorrow. Sheriff can't interfere, technically. You're outside his jurisdiction here." "Wouldn't expect him to." Silas's smile was sharp as a blade. "Law's always been flexible when it comes to men like Garrett." "Doctor," Harrison stood, collecting his bag. "Come back with me. Clara, both of you. It's not safe here." "It's not safe anywhere," Clara said. "At least here we know what's coming. You're making a mistake. This infatuation—" "Careful, doctor." Silas's voice carried warning. "You're a guest here. Act like one." Harrison looked between them, his expression mixing disappointment and resignation. Very well. I've done what I could. He moved to the door, then paused. Clara, your husband was a good man. He'd want better for you than this. My husband is dead, Clara said steadily, and he'd want me to live. That's what I'm doing. After the doctor left, silence settled heavy between them. Silas stood by the window, watching Harrison's departure. He's right about one thing, he said finally. I'm not what James would have wanted for you. Clara moved to him, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. James wanted me to have children and keep house and never question anything. He loved me, but he loved his idea of me more. She pressed her cheek against his back. You see me as I am. That's worth more than all the respectability in the world. He turned in her arms, cupping her face in his scarred hands. What I see is a woman too brave for her own good, standing with a man who's brought violence to her door. You could still leave, take Harrison's wagon, go somewhere new, start over without all this. And you? What would you do? What I've always done, survive, fight, move on. Alone? His silence was answer enough. No, Clara said firmly. We're past that now. Silas, last night changed things. I'm not running, and neither are you. We stand together or not at all. He kissed her then, fierce and desperate. Stubborn woman, stubborn man. They spent the rest of the day preparing for siege. Silas taught Clara how to reload quickly, showed her the best positions for cover, drilled her on what to do if he fell. She forced herself to focus on the practical, pushing down the fear that tried to claw its way up her throat. As darkness fell, they ate a simple meal in tense silence. Every sound outside made them freeze, hands reaching for weapons, but the attack didn't come. Maybe they're waiting for full dark, Silas said, checking his rifle for the 100th time. Maybe. Clara moved to sit beside him. Silas, I need you to promise me something? No. You don't even know what I'm going to ask. You're going to ask me to save myself if things go bad, leave you, and run. The answer's no. She took his hand, tracing the scars across his knuckles. Then promise me this. If we survive tomorrow, we don't waste it. We don't let fear or propriety or the past steal any more time from us. And if we don't survive, then at least we had last night. At least we had this. He lifted their joined hands, kissing her fingers. All right, I promise. We survive this. We live, really live, together. Together, she echoed. They settled in to wait, rifles close at hand, watching the darkness beyond the windows. Whatever came with dawn, they would face it as they'd found each other, scarred but not broken, afraid but not alone. In the distance, a wolf howled, long and mournful. Silas squeezed Clara's hand. That's not a wolf, he said quietly. That's Garrett. He's coming. Clara checked her rifle, surprised to find her hand steady. Then let him come. We're ready. The night stretched before them, pregnant with violence and possibility. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. And sometimes, in a world full of loss and loneliness, that was miracle enough. The attack never came. Dawn broke gray and silent, finding Clara and Silas still at their posts, exhausted from vigilance. Garrett had played his first card, fear, uncertainty, the slow torture of waiting. He's trying to wear us down, Silas said, rubbing his red-rimmed eyes. Make us jumpy, careless, then he'll strike. Clara set down her rifle, her arms aching. We can't keep this up indefinitely. No, which is why you're leaving. His tone brooked no argument. I'll ride with you to the main road. Make sure you get to... We've had this conversation. She stood, stretching stiff muscles. I'm not leaving. Clara, would you leave if it were me Garrett threatened? Would you run? His silence was answer enough. Then don't ask me to do what you wouldn't. She moved to the stove, starting coffee with hands that barely trembled. We need a different plan. This cabin's too exposed. Is there anywhere more defensible? Silas considered. There's an old mine shaft, about 3 miles up. Apache showed it to me years back. Good sight lines, only one way in. But it's a hard climb, especially in snow. Then we'd better start packing. They worked quickly, gathering essential supplies, ammunition, medical kit, food, blankets. Clara noticed Silas carefully wrapping Nina's letters in oilcloth before tucking them in his pack. "For luck?" she asked. "For remembering there's still good in the world," he replied. They left at midday, when the sun was highest and shadows shortest. Silas led, picking a path through terrain that seemed impassable to Clara's eyes. The climb was brutal, snow-covered rocks treacherous under their feet. More than once, Clara slipped, saved only by Silas's quick reflexes. "Almost there," he encouraged as they scrambled up a particularly steep section. "Just around this," the shot rang out like thunder, echoing off the canyon walls. Silas grunted, his hand going to his shoulder as blood bloomed across his shirt. "Down!" He pushed Clara behind a boulder as more shots peppered the rocks around them. "How bad?" Clara's hands were already reaching for him, medical instincts overriding fear. "Through and through. I'll live." He peered around the rock, firing twice. 3 of them, maybe 4. Garrett's not with them. "Where is he?" "That's what worries me." Silas reloaded one-handed while Clara pressed her scarf against his shoulder. "This is a diversion. He's after something else." They were pinned down. Nowhere to go but back the way they'd come or forward into gunfire. Clara's mind raced. Then she remembered the rifle lessons. Silas's voice in her ear. "Sometimes the best defense is unexpected offense." "I have an idea," she said. "But you're not going to like it?" Before he could protest, she was moving. Not away from the gunfire, but parallel to it, using the broken terrain for cover. She heard Silas curse behind her, then the sharp crack of his rifle providing cover fire. The gunman, focused on Silas's position, didn't see her flanking them until too late. Clara's first shot went wide, but it scattered them, breaking their concentration. Her second shot found its mark, dropping one man clutching his leg. "The woman! Get the woman!" someone shouted. But Silas was already moving, advancing on their broken position with lethal grace despite his wound. The remaining gunmen fled, dragging their injured companion. Clara slumped against a rock, adrenaline leaving her shaky. Silas reached her, his face a mix of fury and admiration. "That was the most foolish, brave, infuriating thing I've ever seen," he said, pulling her roughly against him. "It worked, didn't it?" Her voice was muffled against his chest. "Never do it again. I'll do whatever it takes to keep us alive." She pulled back to examine his shoulder. "This needs proper tending. The mine's just ahead. We can—" A new voice cut through the air, amplified by the canyon walls. "Hart, impressive showing, but games are over. I've got something you might want to see." They looked down to see Garrett on the trail below, holding a familiar figure at gunpoint. Clara's heart stopped. "Dr. Harrison," she breathed. The elderly doctor looked terrified, but unharmed. Garrett grinned up at them. "Caught him heading back to town. Seems he was worried about Mrs. Whitmore. Decided to check on her again. Touching, really." Garrett pressed his gun to Harrison's temple. "Here's the deal. Hart, you come down. Just you, and the good doctor goes free. Otherwise—" He cocked the hammer. "Don't!" Clara started forward, but Silas caught her arm. "That's what he wants," he said quietly. "Me in the open, you unprotected. Please!" "Doctor," Harrison called up, his voice shaking. "Don't risk yourselves for me. I'm an old man. I've lived my life." "Shut up," Garrett snarled. "Hart, you've got 1 minute to decide. The woman can go free too. I keep my word on that. It's you I want." Clara saw the decision forming in Silas's eyes. "No," she said fiercely. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." He touched her face gently. "Listen to me. When I go down there, you run back to the cabin, get a horse. Ride hard for anywhere but here. I won't. You will." His voice was iron. "Because if you don't, Harrison dies for nothing, and I won't have another innocent death on my conscience. 30 seconds. Hart." Silas kissed her hard, desperate. "Remember your promise. If you survive, live, really live." We survived together. You said—" I lied. He smiled sadly. "I'm good at that. Now get ready to run." He started down the slope before she could stop him, favoring his wounded shoulder but moving steadily. Clara watched through tears as he approached Garrett, hands raised. "Smart man," Garrett said. "On your knees." Silas complied, his eyes never leaving Garrett's face. "Let them go first." "Sure." Garrett shoved Dr. Harrison away. "Run along. Doc, tell everyone how Silas Hart died. Make it a good story." Harrison hesitated, looking between Silas and Clara, still visible on the slope above. "Go," Silas said quietly. "Both of you, now." That's when Clara saw it. Movement in the rocks behind Garrett. A flash of color that shouldn't be there. Her breath caught as she recognized the figure. Jake Morrison, moving silent as smoke, rifle raised. But Garrett must have sensed something. He spun, firing wild. Jake's shot went wide, and suddenly everyone was moving. Silas lunged for Garrett. Harrison dove for cover, and Clara, abandoning all thought of running, scrambled down the slope. The fight was vicious and brief. Silas, wounded and exhausted, was no match for Garrett's desperate strength. They rolled in the dirt, fighting for control of Garrett's gun. It fired once, twice, the shots echoing like thunder. Clara reached them as Garrett gained the upper hand, the gun turning toward Silas's head. She didn't think, just swung her rifle like a club. The stock connected with Garrett's skull with a sickening crack. He toppled sideways. Still, Silas lay gasping, blood spreading beneath him. Not from the shoulder, lower, worse. Clara fell to her knees beside him. "No, no, no!" Her hands pressed against the wound, already knowing it was bad, fatal bad. "Silas, look at me." His gray eyes found hers, already clouding. Did you run?" "Of course not, you fool." Tears streamed down her face. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." "Stubborn." His hand found hers, weak but warm. "Beautiful, stubborn woman." Jake Morrison appeared, supporting Dr. Harrison. The doctor, shaking off his shock, knelt beside them. One look at the wound and he met Clara's eyes, shaking his head minutely. "Get help," Clara said anyway. "Ride fast. Bring supplies." "Clara." Silas's voice was fading. "Stop. Just be here, please." She cradled his head in her lap, smoothing his dark hair back from his face. "I'm here. I'm not leaving. Good." He coughed, specks of blood on his lips. "Lived more, these past days, than 3 years before. You did that. You brought me back to life. You brought me back too." Her tears fell on his face. "We were supposed to have more time. Had enough. Had you?" His eyes drifted to the sky, vast and blue above them. "Tell Nina. Tell her I wasn't alone at the end. Tell her." Her brother came back to her, just for a while. "I'll tell her. Clara." His grip tightened briefly. "Promise me. Anything. Live. Not just survive. Live. I promise," she whispered. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Then Silas Hart. Tracker. Survivor. The man who taught her to breathe again. Let out his last breath in her arms. Clara held him as the sun tracked across the sky. As Jake and Dr. Harrison dealt with Garrett's unconscious form. As the world moved on without Silas Hart in it. She held him until the stars came out, fierce and bright in the desert sky, and wondered how she was supposed to keep a promise when the person who'd taught her how to live was gone. But she would. Somehow, she would. Because that's what you did when someone saved your soul. You honored their memory by refusing to let that salvation be wasted. "Come, my dear." "Doctor," Harrison said gently, hours later. "Let us take him home." Clara kissed Silas's forehead one last time, then let them help her stand. She was widow again, but different now, marked by wild love and terrible loss, but also by the knowledge that she'd chosen to truly live. If only for a handful of days, it would have to be enough. It was more than many got. And she would carry it with her, fierce and bright as desert stars, for whatever days remained. Clara returned to Cedar Falls in Jake Morrison's wagon. but she was no longer the same woman who had left. Dr. Harrison had offered to speak on her behalf, to explain the heroics of her final days with Silas, but she declined. Let them think what they would. She had more pressing concerns. The boarding house landlady, Mrs. Hutchins, barely concealed her disapproval as Clara unpacked her few belongings. "Quite the adventure you've had, Mrs. Whitmore. The whole town's been talking." "I imagine they have." Clara hung her black dress in the wardrobe, fingers lingering on the fabric. She wouldn't wear it again, not for James, not for Silas. Her mourning now lived in places too deep for cloth to touch. "Pastor Brennan wants to see you, says it's urgent." "Tomorrow. I'll see him tomorrow." That night, Clara sat at her small desk and wrote a letter to Nina Hart in Missouri. She told her about Silas's final days, about his bravery, about how he'd spoken of her and Jonah. She didn't mention their intimacy, but she wrote of partnership, of two souls finding unexpected grace in each other. She sealed the letter with wax and Silas's silver wolf charm, which she'd kept. The next morning, she faced Pastor Brennan in his study. He looked older, grayer, disappointed. "Clara," he began, "what you've done has brought scandal upon this church, upon this community. What I've done," she kept her voice level, "I provided medical care to a wounded man. I helped stop a dangerous criminal. Dr. Harrison can attest to that. You lived alone with a man, unmarried. The circumstances don't erase the impropriety." "No," she agreed. "They don't. Just as circumstances didn't erase my grief when James died, or Mr. Hart's when he lost his brother. We're all walking wounded, Pastor. Some of us just hide it better." "This isn't about hiding. It's about moral behavior. Is it moral to let a man die alone because treating him might start gossip? Is it moral to care more about reputation than compassion?" She stood. "I've done nothing I'm ashamed of. If that makes me unwelcome here, so be it." The pastor's face reddened. "You're putting me in a difficult position. The Women's Auxiliary has already voted. You're no longer welcome at their meetings, and I cannot, in good conscience, continue to employ you here." Clara had expected this, but it still stung. "I understand. I'll collect my things." "Clara, wait." His voice softened. "You're grieving, perhaps in time, with proper repentance." "I'm not repenting for learning how to live." She met his eyes steadily. "But I do forgive you, Pastor. It must be terrible to be so afraid of life that you spend all your time preparing for death." She left the church with her head high, ignoring the whispers that followed. At the general store, "Mr." Paulson served her with obvious reluctance, while his wife pointedly turned her back. Only Jake Morrison nodded to her on the street, respect in his weathered face. "You need anything, Mrs. Whitmore, you let me know," he said quietly. "What you did up there, facing down Garrett, that took real courage." "Thank you, Jake." She touched his arm. "For everything." That evening, as Clara contemplated her dwindling funds and limited options, an unexpected visitor knocked. She opened the door to find Dr. Harrison, medical bag in hand. "Doctor? May I come in? I have a proposition." She served him tea while he gathered his thoughts. "Finally," he spoke. "I'm getting old. Clara, too old to make house calls in the middle of the night, to ride out to remote homesteads. I need help. You're offering me work? I'm offering you a partnership. You've proven yourself capable under the worst conditions. Your medical knowledge is sound. Your instincts excellent." He set down his cup. "It won't stop the gossip, but it would give you purpose, income, a reason to stay, if you want to." Clara considered. Part of her wanted to leave Cedar Falls, to find somewhere where her past didn't follow. But Silas's words echoed, "Living isn't about running, it's about choosing to stand." "I accept," she said, "on one condition. We treat everyone, including the Apache families outside town. No exceptions." "Doctor," Harrison smiled, "I wouldn't expect anything less from the woman who stood with Silas Hart." Word of her new position spread quickly. Some families refused to let her treat them. But others, the desperate, the poor, those who knew what it was to be outsiders, welcomed her skill regardless of scandal. 2 weeks into her new work, Clara was returning from a berthing at the Mexican settlement when she found a woman waiting at her door. She was young, pretty, with dark hair and familiar gray eyes. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Nina Sullivan, Silas Hart's sister." Clara's heart clenched. "Mrs. Sullivan, please, come in." Over tea, Nina studied her with those piercing heart eyes. "I got your letter. Thank you for letting me know, and for returning the charm." "He spoke of you often." "Especially near the end." "Did he?" Tears gathered in Nina's eyes. "I wrote him every month for 3 years. Never got a single reply, but I kept hoping." Clara rose and retrieved something from her trunk. Silas's letters, still tied with string. He kept everyone, read them over and over. He just didn't know how to reach back across all that pain. Nina took the bundle with shaking hands. "Oh, Silas." She looked up at Clara. "Tell me about his last days. Please, I need to know he found some peace." So Clara told her. Not everything. Some memories were too private to share, but enough. She spoke of Silas's courage, his dry humor, his surprising gentleness. She told Nina about the shooting lessons, the card games, the quiet evenings by the fire when old wounds seemed to heal a little. He found his way back to himself. Clara finished. Just for a while, but truly, he laughed, he hoped, he lived. Nina wept then, and Clara held her, 2 women bound by love for a complicated man. "I brought something," Nina said finally, composing herself. She pulled out a small wrapped package. "This was our mother's. Silas sent it to me before he went into the mountains. Said he wouldn't need it anymore. But I think he'd want you to have it." Inside was a simple gold ring, worn smooth with age. Clara's throat tightened. "I can't, please." Nina pressed it into her hand. "You gave him something I couldn't, acceptance of who he'd become, not who he used to be. That's a rare gift." After Nina left, promising to write, Clara sat alone in her room, turning the ring in her fingers. She thought about wearing it, but that felt like trying to hold on to something that was never meant to be permanent. Instead, she threaded it onto a chain around her neck, close to her heart, but hidden from the world's judgment. Days turned to weeks. Clara threw herself into her work, learning from Dr. Harrison, building her own reputation as a healer. She delivered babies, set bones, sat with the dying. Each life she touched felt like keeping her promise to Silas. To live, not just survive. One evening, as autumn painted the desert in shades of gold and rust, Clara received an unexpected summons. Sheriff McKenna stood at her door, hat in hand. "Evening, Mrs. Whitmore. Wondering if you might come with me. Got a prisoner who's asking for you." Garrett. He'd been awaiting trial for attempted murder, among other charges. Clara's first instinct was to refuse, but something, curiosity, perhaps, or a need for closure, made her agree. The jail was small, just 2 cells. Garrett sat in one, looking smaller than she remembered, his bravado stripped away. "Come to gloat?" he asked as she approached. "No, you asked for me. What do you want?" He studied her through the bars. "To understand, I guess, Hart was nothing, a broken-down tracker living like a hermit. What made him worth dying for?" Clara considered her words carefully. "He wasn't nothing. He was a man trying to find redemption, same as any of us." "Redemption." Garrett spat the word. "He cost me good men, my reputation, everything. No, you cost yourself those things the day you chose greed over honor." She stepped closer. "But it's not too late, even now. You could choose differently. Like Hart did? Look where that got him." "Yes, look where it got him." Clara's voice was steady. "He died free. Can you say the same?" She left Garrett to his thoughts, knowing he'd probably hang for his crimes, but hoping, perhaps foolishly, that her words might spark something. Outside the jail, sunset painted the sky in brilliant streams of orange and purple. Clara stood watching it, feeling the weight and lightness of her strange new life. She was still a widow, still gossiped about, still walking a difficult path. But she was walking it with purpose now, with the kind of fierce intentionality that Silas had taught her. Tomorrow there would be more patience, more challenges, more opportunities to choose life over mere existence. And someday, perhaps, the scandal would fade and she'd just be Doc Clara, the woman who'd helped Dr. Harrison and wasn't afraid to ride out to any homestead that needed her. But tonight, she simply stood in the dying light, one hand touching the hidden ring at her throat, and whispered a prayer of gratitude for the scarred tracker who'd shown her that sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply deciding to live. The desert wind carried her words away, out toward the mountains where Silas had made his home, and for just a moment, Clara could swear she heard the distant howl of a wolf, wild and free and very much alive. 3 months had passed since Clara began working with Dr. Harrison. The scandal of her time with Silas Hart had faded to a dull murmur, replaced by grudging respect for her medical skills. She'd delivered babies in blizzards, treated gunshot wounds without flinching, and sat through fever outbreaks that would have sent others running. But lately, she'd been feeling peculiar, tired in a bone-deep way, nauseated by the smell of coffee she'd always loved. When she missed her second monthly course, the truth became undeniable. She was carrying Silas's child. Clara sat in a room that night, hands pressed to her still flat stomach, overwhelmed by the magnitude of this discovery. A baby. Their baby. Joy and terror warred within her. Joy for this unexpected gift. Terror at what it would mean for her already precarious position in town. She couldn't hide it forever. And when it became known, the next morning, she found Dr. Harrison in his office, preparing medicines. "Doctor, I need to speak with you, privately." He looked up, noting her pale face. "Sit down, my dear. You look unwell." "I'm not unwell. She took a breath. "I'm with child." Harrison's hands stilled on his bottles. He studied her for a long moment, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Hearts?" "Yes." "How far along?" 3 months, perhaps a bit more. He sank into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 70 years. "Oh, Clara, this changes everything." "I know." Her voice was steady despite her racing heart. "I'll understand if you need to dissolve our partnership. I can leave town, find somewhere." "Absolutely not." His voice was firm. "You're the best assistant I've ever had, but Clara, the town, they'll be merciless. Let 'em. I've survived their judgment before." "This is different. An illegitimate child." "My child is not illegitimate," Clara said fiercely. "Silas and I may not have stood before a preacher, but what we had was real, more real than many marriages I've seen. This child was conceived in love, and I won't let anyone make me ashamed of that." "Doctor," Harrison was quiet for a moment. "Then, you're right, and you won't face this alone, but we need to be smart about how we proceed." Over the following weeks, they developed a plan. Clara would continue working as long as she could. When her condition became obvious, she'd tell people she and Silas had married in secret before his death. A lie, but one that would protect the child from the worst of society's cruelty. Nina Sullivan was the first person Clara told the truth to, in a carefully worded letter. The response came quickly, filled with joy and promises of support. "You're carrying my nephew or niece," Nina wrote. "That makes you family, official papers or not." As winter deepened and Clara's condition began to show, the whispers started again. But something unexpected happened. The Mexican and Apache families she'd treated rallied around her. They brought food, offered help, their women sharing knowing smiles and pregnancy wisdom. To them, she wasn't the scandalous widow, but the healer who'd come when their children were sick, who'd treated them with dignity when others wouldn't. Even some of the town's respectable women began to soften, especially those she'd helped through difficult births. Mrs. Morrison, Jake's daughter-in-law, whom Clara had saved from childbed fever, was the first to publicly acknowledge her. nodding greeting on the street despite her mother-in-law's horrified protests. Pastor Brennan summoned her when she was 6 months along, her condition undeniable beneath her loosened corsets. "I've heard the stories you're telling," he said without preamble, "about a secret marriage. Have you? We both know it's a lie." "Clara?" She met his eyes steadily. "Do we? Were you there in those mountains? Pastor, do you know what promises were made? What vows were spoken? Marriage is more than papers and witnesses. It's a commitment between souls. And that, Silas and I had, you're splitting hairs. I'm protecting my child. Surely even you can understand that." His expression softened slightly. "The child is innocent, I grant you. But Clara, your defiance. My defiance kept a good man from dying alone. My defiance stopped a criminal. My defiance has saved lives in this town." She stood, one hand on her swollen belly. "If that damns me in your eyes, so be it, but I'll stand before God with a clear conscience." As she reached the door, he called out, "The church offers aid to widows and orphans. If you need—" "Thank you, but no." She looked back. "My child and I will make our own way." Spring arrived early that year, melting snow and bringing unexpected warmth. Clara was checking supplies in the medical office when the first pain hit. Sharp and sudden. She gripped the table, breathing through it. "Not yet," she whispered. "Please, not yet." But babies keep their own time. Another pain, stronger. She made it to the door before her water broke. "Doctor! Harrison!" she called, then louder. "Doctor!" He appeared from the back room, took one look at her, and sprang into action despite his age. "Mrs. Morrison!" he barked to a woman passing outside. "Fetch the midwife, quickly!" They got Clara to the small room behind the office that served as their surgery. She'd attended dozens of births, but being on the other side was entirely different. The pain was immense, primal, threatening to tear her apart. "I can't," she gasped between contractions. "Yes, you can." Mrs. Sanchez, the Mexican midwife, gripped her hands. "You're strong. Your man was strong. This baby will be strong." Hours passed in a haze of pain and effort. Clara thought of Silas, wishing desperately he could be there. She thought of all the women she'd helped through this, understanding now their courage in a whole new way. Then, as dawn broke, a cry pierced the air. High, angry, very much alive. "A son, Mrs." Sanchez announced, placing the squalling infant on Clara's chest. "Perfect, healthy." Clara looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and beautiful. He had a shock of dark hair like his father, but when he opened his eyes, they were green like hers. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I'm your mama, and you're going to be so loved." Dr. Harrison, who'd waited anxiously outside, came in to check both patients. His eyes were suspiciously moist as he examined the baby. "What will you name him?" he asked. Clara had thought about this for months. Samuel James Hart. For Silas's lost friend. For her late husband. For the father who'd never hold him. A name carrying history but pointing toward the future. Word of the birth spread quickly. To Clara's surprise, gifts began appearing. A knitted blanket from Mrs. Morrison, preserves from the Mexican families, even a small carved horse from the Apache settlement. Not everyone approved, but enough did that Clara didn't feel entirely alone. Nina arrived 2 weeks later, having traveled from Missouri the moment she got word. She took one look at Samuel and burst into tears. "Oh, Clara, he looks just like Silas did as a baby. Mama would have been so happy." She cradled her nephew tenderly. "I brought something." From her bag, she pulled out a leather journal. This was Silas's, from before. Everything. I thought maybe someday Samuel should read it, know who his father was before the world broke him. Clara opened it carefully. Silas's younger handwriting filled the pages. Observations about tracking, sketches of plants and animals, even some attempts at poetry. It was a glimpse of the man he'd been, the man who'd still lived somewhere inside the scarred tracker she'd known. "Thank you," she whispered. Life settled into a new rhythm. Clara worked when she could, Samuel sleeping in a basket beside her desk, or carried in a sling as she made house calls. The sight of the young widow with her baby became familiar around Cedar Falls. Some still whispered, but many more simply saw a woman doing her best, raising her child with love and determination. One evening, as Clara sat nursing Samuel on the porch of their small house, she'd moved from the boarding house. Needing space for a growing child, Sheriff McKenna approached. "Evening, Mrs. Hart." He'd taken to using the name she'd claimed, a small kindness. "Thought you should know. Garrett was found guilty. He'll hang next week." Clara felt no satisfaction, only sadness for the waste of it all. "Thank you for telling me. There's more. He's been trying to trade information for clemency. Mentioned something about Hart having a stash hidden somewhere. Gold, he claims, from his scouting days. I know nothing about any gold. Didn't figure you did. Just thought you should know in case anyone comes asking." He tipped his hat. "You take care now. That's a fine boy you're raising." After he left, Clara pondered this news. Gold? Silas had lived simply, never showing signs of hidden wealth. But then she remembered something, a loose floorboard in the cabin he'd always avoided stepping on. The next Sunday, she hired Jake Morrison to drive her and Samuel out to the abandoned cabin. It felt strange returning to the place where her life had changed so drastically. The building stood empty but intact, mountain flowers beginning to bloom around it. Inside, memories threatened to overwhelm her. There was the chair where Silas had sat for her treatments, the bed where they'd... She pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on her purpose. The floorboard came up easily, revealing an oilskin package. Inside were gold coins, not a fortune, but enough to ensure Samuel's education and security. There was also a letter in Silas's hand. "If you're reading this, I'm gone and you're in need. This gold comes honest, payment for saving a Mexican governor's daughter from bandits. I kept it for someday. Guess someday came. Use it well. S.H." Clara sat on the floor of the empty cabin, holding her son and the letter, crying for all that was lost and all that remained. Samuel fussed, and she offered him her breast, life continuing its ancient rhythm even in the midst of grief. As they prepared to leave, Clara picked a handful of the wildflowers. Indian paintbrush, as red as blood, as red as life. She laid them on the doorstep. A final goodbye to the place where Clara Whitmore, the proper widow, had died, and Clara Hart, the frontier woman, had been born. Back in town, she deposited the gold quietly, letting people assume it was Silas's military pension if they asked. She continued her work, raising her son, building a life that honored both the man she'd lost and the promise she'd made to truly live. Years later, when Samuel was old enough to understand, she would tell him about his father, about the scarred tracker who'd found redemption in love, about the courage it took to choose connection over isolation, about how sometimes the greatest adventures lasted only days but echoed through lifetimes. But for now, she simply held her baby close as Jake drove them home through the desert spring, the mountains watching over them like ancient guardians in her heart. She carried Silas's memory, not as a weight but as wings, lifting her toward all the life still waiting to be lived. And somewhere in those distant peaks, a wolf howled, wild and free and unashamed, calling to its mate across the vast spaces between earth and sky. Thank you so much for listening to this story from the Wild West. I hope Clara and Silas's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine. Where are you listening from today? Drop a comment below and let me know. I love connecting with fellow Western romance enthusiasts from around the world. If you enjoyed this tale of redemption and unexpected love, please consider subscribing to Wild West Campfire for more stories from the American frontier. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of Clara's choice? Of Silas's sacrifice? Share your feelings in the comments below. Until next time, partners, keep that campfire burning and those Western dreams alive.